What's up, guys? This is the Nemesis Coupe with another video, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my little love child here. And I'm sure that some people were hoping that I was going to be putting a boost gauge in there instead of a water temp gauge, but the boost temp gauge is going to be going over here. And when I have $3,000, $4,000, I think it's like 39 something, that'll eventually happen. So, let's talk about this little guy over here. Now, the bezel, or not the bezel, the pod itself, the part that actually holds the gauge, that was something that I found on Etsy, and Drusifer Customs actually makes them for the 9th generation Civics. He makes all of them using 3D printing. So he 3D printed all of these fins. Go check his stuff out if you have a 9th generation Civic and you want to do something like this. He does them for both sides, the left and the right. Only on the driver's side, he doesn't do ones for either of those vents, only these. But it's really convenient because you don't really have to do any crazy modifications to your dashboard, like drill any holes or anything nuts like that. I mean, the only hole that I really did have to drill is in the actual vent itself on the backside for the wiring harness to fit through. But other than that, I mean, there weren't really any major modifications to do. And then as far as the actual vents themselves, putting them in was kind of a challenge, but not too terrible. And the vent is fully functional. Like, you can still open it and close it. The flap is still back there. I drilled the hole a little more forward so that the flap can still be used. As far as why I went with the temp gauge and why I went through all the trouble of actually putting one of these in, Honda and actually a lot of other car companies, in their infinite wisdom, got rid of, as you can see, you don't see one, they got rid of the coolant temp gauge. So that, to me, I like seeing what my temperature is at. Every single one of my cars had a coolant temp gauge, and I guess just for simplicity's sake or space savings or whatever, they gave you a little light, which is down here for your coolant temp, and it's blue in the 9th generation Civics if it's cold or not up to operating temperature. And then I've read on some forums, I've never had this happen, thank God, but if it overheats or if it starts getting too hot, then it turns red and comes on. I want to avoid that as much as possible. I like being able to see how hot my engine is getting, so that's why I always wanted to get one of these when I got the car about 2 years ago. It's one of the first things that I noticed, that there was no coolant temp gauge, so there it is. It's nice. This is a GlowShift coolant temp gauge, water temp, as you can read there. Now this, you can change the colors of it, and it has like a color shift mode, which I'll show you in a sec. Now what I did was I went through one of the grommets, through the firewall, and ran the power wire from the sensor through that and ran it up along the back here, away from any moving parts, and wired everything in. I ended up using these expandable fuses. I used 3 of them. This one was for the dimmer switch. So every time I turn my lights on, the gauge dims about 30%, and these are constant 12 volts, I believe. Can't quite remember exactly, but they give you directions and everything, explaining what colors go to which power source and how to splice everything in. I ended up getting these. These are Bussman's from AutoZone. They were like, I don't remember, like $5-6 a piece, maybe $8 a piece. But I ended up using some shrink wrap with, or heat shrink with solder in the center, and then adhesive on the ends, and then I electrical taped all of them so that I know for sure that they're not going to, give me any trouble down the road. We will look under the hood. Now under here, let me actually get the hood prop. Under here, what I did was I took the stock cooling tubing and or coolant hose and cut it in half, like they said in the instructions. Cut it. I did accommodate for the fact that this adapter was going to be here, so I cut a little bit more so it wouldn't kink up, and ran the power wire back through the firewall, and then ran the ground to my negative battery terminal. That is my for sure known good ground, and that's pretty much it for that. Teflon tape for the sensor to thread it into the adapter. The adapter, you do have to make sure that you get the correct measurements for what kind of or what size hoses that you have in your vehicle. And mine ended up being 32 millimeter hoses, so that fit nice and snug. So far, no problems. I've had it for about a week, 2 weeks now, I think. The only problem that I did run into was when they give you bullet connectors for the sensor, and the bullet connectors are not all that great. So I ended up cutting those off and splicing my own stuff in, and heat shrinking everything together with the stuff I said before. And I haven't had any problems since, but it wasn't grounding, so it was just kind of open, and I rectified that very quickly. But other than that, that's pretty much it. And then, like I said, I drilled a hole in this. This pops right out. Drilled a hole in that and fed the wiring harness up through, and it just sits in there like that. And what I did was I wrapped this in electrical tape so it fits nice and snug. It's not, when I first got it and first tried to test fit it, it was a little loose, so I just put electrical tape in there so it doesn't shift on me. And looks pretty good. So there you have it. There is the GlowShift temperature gauge, and eventually, like I said before, I'd like to get a boost gauge over there. So I guess we'll see what happens. Now, right now I'm sitting at about, 180, 220. So I'm sitting at about 200 degrees Fahrenheit, which isn't horrible, but meh. You can change the colors with this little button here. You can go and cycle through all the colors. I think they said there were like 7 colors. You got purple, white, blue, and then when it gets to the second blue, it'll start shifting colors like that, which, I mean, is pretty cool, for nighttime driving. Kind of an interesting little thing. But I like to keep it matching the gauges on the rest of the car, which are red. So, this is the Civic Si after all, so we got to keep that red in there. But nonetheless, it's a cool little feature that I'll probably never use, mainly because that's my favorite color, and again, Civic Si. But pretty nifty. It seems to be accurate. I actually would like to do a test with a temp gun and actually see how accurate it actually is. So I'm probably going to do another video at some other point testing it to see how accurate it actually is. But until then, stay tuned for that, and feel free to check out my online merch store. That's the nemesiscoupe.com. There is a link in my About section on my YouTube channel page, and go ahead and check some of that stuff out. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into that stuff, for the most part. But it was kind of a tedious process making some of that stuff. It was fun. It was fun making some of the stuff. I have a lot of things planned and a lot of a lot of changes that I'm going to start making, but go ahead and check that out. Thank you for the support. Thank you for everything. I want to thank all of my subscribers. I want to thank, everybody who's supported me throughout this whole journey. I mean, I've been trying to get the channel straightened out for a couple years now, and it's finally where I want it to be. But we got to keep pushing forward, and I want to do a lot of things with it. So stay tuned. Thank you again.